Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Grimm Chronicles, where I tell you about my weekly reading since last time I posted. So that was, I think, Wednesday. I think it's been a little less than a week. So this has been kind of an odd week because I finished Blood Meridian that I had started, and then I finished The Door, which I'd even started before Blood Meridian. And so for the first time in a very long time, I was sort of like, oh, now I can read something new and start something new. And also Victober has started, and I'm not quite sure if I have the energy to make a separate Victober video, so this may include some thoughts on Victober as well. So in terms of what I'm reading, I decided, because I really had him on my radar for a long time, and a lot of people that I, watch and like Sebald, the German writer who unfortunately was in a car accident and has passed away when he was, I think, my age, 58 or 57. And this is his book, The Rings of Saturn, that I've had on my shelf for a long time. And I finally started it. And sad to say that I did not get along with his style. I'm still kind of mulling over what the issue is here, and I even posted on Twitter, is Sebald overrated? Which I don't think it's quite an issue of being overrated. I think he's just, I don't know, so I'm reading him in German, which is, but he does have a close connection to England and lived in England for a long time. And at least one person on Twitter, if not more than one, mentioned that he is sort of known to have a strange German prose style because of having lived for so long in the Anglo-Saxon world, as Germans refer to England sometimes, and that his syntax is clumsy and clunky, and he's just not. He does have a bit of a reputation as not being a complete stylist. And if you remember what I said about Blood Meridian, I'm almost like too attuned to whether I like the style of someone's prose. I mean, sometimes I wish I could get over myself a little bit there, but I have a hard time, especially, it's becoming even more pronounced, my obsession with style. And so I think I have decided to put it aside for now and then just kind of take a break from it and not force the issue too much. And so it's a question of his style, but I'm even not that convinced about the whole sort of rambling, encyclopedic, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about that. Because it could just be that it's not the right time for me to be reading this. I don't have the mental peaceful, I don't know. It just could be the wrong book at the wrong time. Or it could be that I just don't like Sebald. So if you've read Sebald, I know that that he is very beloved out there. Let me know your thoughts. And also, at least one person, if not more, said he's better in English. He's someone who improves upon being translated, which doesn't really make me want to read him. If he cannot, if he's considered better in translation, maybe one day I'll just try him in translation. I don't know. It seems such a strange thing to do. I'm very much, because I can read German, why would I read him in translation, So, I don't know. So I put that aside. And kind of like a reaction to that was to pick up the Austrian writer Thomas Bernhard, his short novel called Wittgenstein's Nephew. I think it's sort of autofiction. I think he really was in the hospital where this starts, and he'd had a serious illness, and he talks about his friend who's in the adjoining mental institution. So and it's just at the beginning, I'm not very far in, but and I do much prefer the style. I haven't had a good time, enough time to really sink my teeth into it, so it's still at the beginning. I do like it though. His style is almost, he has a very rhythmical, it's a very sort of almost musical way of writing, and he's both cynical and funny and amusing. His sort of view of the world and it's always coming from a place of, he's a patient who is in this hospital, and he's talking about how most people it's almost like a hospice, and he must have been quite young when he was there, but so there is it is infused with this idea of death a little bit too, but the writing is very, especially coming out of having read Sebald and not getting along with the clunky prose, this is just very smooth, but even there I feel like I need more. I'm just too busy with work and other thoughts to get into it that much. But, it's one that I have started. And so I guess for the end here, I'm going to talk a little bit about my Victober reading, such as it were. I'm having, even there, I'm sort of like pushing against the Victober stuff a little bit. I have quite a few things that I could be reading, but I think I've decided to just go along with the next installment of the Barsetshire Chronicles, the small house at Allington, the small house at Allington. And it's going along in typical, enjoyable, Trollopian fashion. We're being introduced to the characters, and he just is very good at, he's kind of condescending and paternalistic towards all of his characters, but he's sort of, it's not sort of only the women, he's like that to everyone, and there's still enough warmth and humanity in how he describes them that you just kind of go along with him for the ride. It's definitely, for me, this is definitely comfort reading, but it also requires sort of a quietness of mind. You have to sort of just sit there and be enveloped by the world of Trollope, and so that's my one Victober thing that I'm doing. And then I'll have to see, because I have some sort of very, very fringe things related to my Victorian relatives. So people who did publish, but these are very sort of not even sort of tier. Well, one of them's actually kind of interesting, but I think I'll save that for another video. I'm not in the mood for doing it right now. And so I guess the last book I'm going to talk about is, so this is a Twitter sort of event that I saw that this professor at somewhere in New York, CUNY, City University of New York, Graduate Center, CUNY, Queens College, Talia Schaffer is a, Victorian studies scholar. So Victorian studies is a pretty vibrant field of people who work on all things Victorian. And I saw this book and I thought, wow, that sounds really interesting. And I thought it might be interesting to sort of read this as a way to sort of enter into Victober from a scholarly perspective. And even though even this book, it's going to be a bit too much for me to be actually reading cover to cover, but I have started it, and it is very interesting. As you can see, it's called Communities of Care, the Social Ethics of Victorian Fiction, which already kind of gives us a lot of things to think about. And she's really good at expanding the idea and notions and bringing scholarly expertise and a lot of scholarly readings to the notion of what care communities and care is. What is care and what are care communities? And then kind of going to the Victorian novels that she's going to talk about with this background of the sort of the field of ethical studies or ethicist studies relating to care and care communities. And so one thing she's really, really quick and good about doing is she wants to distill any, get rid of any notions of our typical thoughts about care. And so let me just read the beginning, because I think it's kind of a funny, pseudo-Victorian start to her secondary book here. She says, "Reader, I want to warn you from the start. Although this book has a title featuring the word care, it is not going to be pleading for us all to care more about each other, nor will it be praising Victorian characters for truly caring. Forget the pleasant platitudes of care. Think of care as a practice, a difficult, often unpleasant, and almost always underpaid, sometimes ineffective practice, but nonetheless an activity that defined the lives of 19th century subjects, particularly female subjects, and that I assert helps define our lives today." I think that's a really strong beginning, and she's going to keep it going. One thing she seems to do in the introduction is she'll use a metaphor to describe something that she's thinking about, and then she'll concretize that metaphor, that image, and kind of interrogate the image and use it then in a different way. And the one example of that here, I'm not sure where exactly she talks about it. She uses the metaphor of the lens through which to view texts or certain situations, and then she extends the lens metaphor and says, describes how it's a visual prosthesis that extends our sight and leads to seeing the familiar anew. And she's even bringing in, I guess she has a background in disability studies, and she says the lens as an extended prosthetic capability rather than the medical correction of a flawed view. Quote, "The lens of care doesn't fix a problem so much as it enhances our abilities." and she brings in feminist philosophy in terms of thinking about care, and also non-Western discussions of care communities. And I think that's really interesting, how to bring Victorian stuff out of the stodgy, sometimes sort of stodgy atmosphere that Victorian books and can evoke in our minds, and bringing it into a more modern discussion of but still kind of true to the texts of what's going on. And then there was something else here. Well, I will admit to sort of skipping around a bit and looking into it, and I did find a really kind of hard-hitting quote here, but one that I do kind of agree with, which is I think it was in the first chapter, where she talks about kind of a negative idea of care. Oh, of course, now I'm not finding it. It had to do with, it's in the first chapter. She brings up Rudyard Kipling. Where is it? Here. And she's talking about care in terms of maternalism, and so the sort of the dark side of maternalism as an instrument of control, a managerial technique by which employees use the performance of benevolence to control their employees. This goes back at least as far as the American Civil War, according to Rosemary Garland Thompson, who analyzes the maternalist dynamic in which a white woman rescues a disabled, often black woman, as in Uncle Tom's Cabin. And so moving on into even more kind of critical stuff, in the next paragraph she says, maternalism as sentimental self-subordination, maternalism as insidious emotional control, these are the flip sides of a toxic power dynamic in which women get stuck. In the 19th century, this dynamic was writ large onto the entire globe. In Victorian colonialist rhetoric, the idea of care was used to justify controlling a supposedly childlike indigenous population. There you go. Colonialism was, quote, made morally palatable by the rhetoric of responsibility and care for enslaved and colonized others, points out Uma Narayan, another scholar. Kipling's The White Man's Burden is perhaps the most famous example of this kind of care-based rhetoric, in its insistence that the colonizer would, quote, serve your captive's needs, patiently laboring, quote, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. In works like an ABC for Baby Patriots, women's maternal teaching was explicitly used to instill colonial infantilization. And so that's something that's a little bit close to when I do fairy tales, the fact that these very, very supposedly off the surface, innocent, apolitical texts, sometimes also for children, embody or contain almost propagandistic ideas of it's about educating the young people in a certain way and to feel a certain way about historical events or something. So it's highly ideological, even though it's purported to be innocent and apolitical. Anyway, I think it's really good and really, really interesting. I think it's worthy of my time, and I'm going to take it slow and not sort of just do it because of October or whatever. And this might even go into, beyond October. But the takeaway for today's lesson, so to speak, is that the idea that care is an action, not a feeling, and that it's sort of, she's trying to expand how we think about care. The German word for care is interesting, Sorge, sich sorgen, to care for, but it's closely related to worry, to worry about things. And I think that's an interesting idea to care for things is to sort of pay attention to them, but it is also to expend mental energy thinking about them, people, whatever situations. So I think that's really interesting too. And it does relate to one of the best books secondary works that I read on my person that I used to do research on, Bettina von Arnim, this concept of self-care, but not in the way we use it, Selbstsorge. But anyway, don't need to get into that right now. So yeah, that's where we're at. Just in case you're interested, so what are the Victorian novels that she's going to do her readings on connected to the framework of care? She starts out with Austen, so pre Austen, and I think she's going to talk about Sanditon, so pre typical Victorian stuff. And then she's going to read Dickens, and I'm not sure which Dickens. Maybe more general Dickens stuff, Bronte's Bodies Before the Nomad. And then she's going to go and talk about Villette. So Charlotte Bronte's wonderful novel about, and that chapter is called Global Migrant Care and Emotional Labor in Villette. Then she's going to talk about Daniel Deronda, which is a really good one for this stuff about care, Beyond Sympathy, the state of care in Daniel Deronda. And then she's going to talk about a novel that I really remember loving. I'm not sure if we can claim Henry James as a Victorian, but it was written in the time period, and he's almost like he's a very Anglophile American author. But she's going to talk about care meets the silent treatment in The Wings of the Dove, which that sounds really good. And then her last chapter is a novel that I did download and start reading, but not sure if I really want to read it. And it's Charlotte Yonge, Yonge, a sort of second tier Victorian person who did write a lot, but she's sort of the ultimate church lady. So, but anyway, and it's The Heir of Redcliffe. So that chapter is called Composite Fiction and the Care Community in The Heir of Redcliffe. And even there, I have a vague family connection to Young, but I won't talk about that now. So I do have that one on my Kindle, and I might go back to it. These are all kinds of things that I would do, but to be honest, I am rather busy with work and thinking about this course, the Overload course. I don't know if I'm going to be teaching it, but I think I am. So yeah, I'm a little bit, anyway. But I do have a bit of a break coming up. We have a 1-day break. We have a 1-day full break on Fridays. So maybe I'll try and make some headway into mainly Trollope, and I'm almost wondering if I might put this to the side, but I'll see how I feel. I'm not sure if it goes that well with Trollope, but, under normal circumstances, it wouldn't really bother me. Oh, and I haven't even talked about my lovely, lovely audiobook, which I'm almost at the end at, but you know what? So it is called A Fortnight in September, and it is really, really a good comfort listen. But I think I'm going to save my little talk about that one till next week, because it's already 17 minutes, and I think that's enough for this week. But I will suffice to say that it's by someone called R.C.Sheriff, and I mentioned it last time, and it is very good, and I highly recommend it, and I will talk about it more next week. Hope everyone is doing well, and I will talk to you in the next installment. And happy Victober, happy reading, and yeah, until next time, bye-bye. Okay, here is a short addendum. I'm not going to talk about the audio, but I did want to mention a Netflix series that I kind of have been binging, when I have my not able to fall asleep nights. And it is there is a novel version of it too, but I'm finding it quite entertaining and quite good, and also very binge-worthy, and that is the show Maid. I wonder if any of my viewers have watched that show or know about it was turned into, I think, an article that went kind of viral, but it's very good, and it connects it's about this poor woman who's put upon by her toxic relationships. Andie MacDowell from way back, she's amazing as her very, very messed up mother. And then the husband's also very good, the actor, but it's very sort of emotionally turbulent watching, but it's quite well done, and the main lady is also very good. But it's all about how she has to work as a maid, and her relationship to the various houses that she goes to, and of course it reminds me of The Door, and that whole and also in a certain sort of sense also the care stuff that I'm reading about, care communities and care, and how the specific relationship of a maid to a house cleaner to the person's houses, and even the material stuff in the houses, and of course the people who own the houses, and how messed up they are, and how it's actually quite well done and quite moving, and doesn't really make me want to fall asleep, but that's okay. It's entertaining when I can't sleep. So I did want to add that in there, because I haven't quite finished the 10 episodes, but I wanted to see if any one of you are watching it or know about the book too that she wrote about it, and if it's worth, to get it on Kindle, maybe even follow up with having seen the show or not. Just wanted to add that in. Thank you, bye.